The silks were softer than anything he'd ever known. They felt like a lie against his skin. 14-year-old Vlad, Prince of Wallachia, wasn't a guest in the Ottoman court. He was a cage ornament, a political hostage traded by his own father for a fragile peace. Beside him, his younger brother Radu marveled at the geometric patterns on the walls, his eyes wide with the palace's splendor. But Vlad only saw the guards. He felt the weight of their scimitars in every shadow. He smelled the cloying, sweet incense meant to mask the scent of fear. This place wasn't a home. It was a beautifully crafted prison where the Sultan, Murad II, was the zookeeper. The mantra began in his head, a single, desperate word: order. The Ottomans had it. Their armies marched in perfect step. Their court moved with deadly precision. Back home, in the muddy, scheming chaos of Wallachia, the boyar nobles plotted in smoky taverns, their loyalty as thin as morning fog. His father, Vlad II Dracul, member of the Order of the Dragon, was a weak man trying to rule a nation of jackals. Here, there were no jackals, only lions, and the lion tamer. "They teach us poetry, brother," Radu whispered one night, his breath smelling of honeyed milk. "They teach us philosophy. The Sultan himself complimented my archery." Vlad didn't answer. He was watching a cart of prisoners being hauled past their window, their faces blank with resignation. He was studying the architecture of the gallows in the courtyard. This was the empire's true philosophy, the ultimate lesson. Power wasn't about poetry. It was about the clean, undeniable logic of a sharpened spike. Then came the first twist, the one that cracked his soul. The Sultan's son, the young Prince Mehmet, a boy their age with ancient, hungry eyes, took a special interest in Radu. He brought him gifts. He praised his beauty. Radu, starved for affection, bloomed under the attention. He started wearing Turkish silks, not as a costume, but as a second skin. He began to pray to their god. One afternoon, a eunuch found Vlad practicing with a wooden sword in the courtyard, his knuckles raw, his face a mask of fury. "Your brother is with Prince Mehmet," the eunuch said with a knowing sneer. The implication hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Vlad felt a humiliation so profound it almost choked him. His brother wasn't just a hostage anymore. He was a conquest. Then came the final break, with a scroll delivered by a messenger with pitiless eyes. It wasn't sealed with his father's dragon crest. It was a crude stamp from a rival boyar. His father, Vlad Dracul, had been betrayed, ambushed by the boyars he'd tried to appease. They'd buried him alive. His older brother, Mircea, had fared worse. They'd blinded him with red-hot pokers before burying him alongside his father. The words swam before his eyes: betrayal, chaos, weakness. He looked for Radu, needing to share the volcanic grief, to forge a plan for vengeance. He found him in the gardens, laughing with Mehmet. Radu saw the look on Vlad's face, and the smile died. "They killed them," Vlad rasped, the words like swallowing glass. "We have to go back. We have to make them pay." Radu looked from Vlad's burning eyes to Mehmet's cool, possessive gaze, and in that moment, he made a choice. He chose the cage. He chose the power. He chose the enemy. "This is my home now, Vlad," Radu said, his voice soft, but the words were a blade in Vlad's gut. "Wallachia is a corpse. I will not be buried with it." The betrayal was absolute. Vlad stood alone, the son of a murdered king, brother to a traitor. The Turks hadn't just taken his freedom, they'd stolen his blood. They'd shown him that the only family you could trust was the one you forged in fire and fear. He would have his vengeance. He would have his throne. He would bring order to the land of chaos. But what happens when a boy raised by monsters is finally sent home to rule? Wallachia tasted of mud and rot. After years in the sterile opulence of the Ottoman court, returning home was like waking up in a grave. The air was thick with the stench of wood smoke and conspiracy. The boyars, the very men who'd murdered his family, greeted him with feasts and toothy smiles, their hands still stained with his father's blood. They thought he was a puppet, a boy prince propped up by Turkish swords who they could easily manipulate. They had made a catastrophic miscalculation. His mantra pounded in his skull: order. The first lesson came on Easter Sunday. Vlad invited every major boyar and their families to a grand feast in the capital of Tirgovishte. Hundreds came. They drank his wine, ate his roasted lamb, and clapped him on the back. They spoke of a new era of prosperity, their voices dripping with false loyalty. One old boyar, bloated with wine and arrogance, leaned in close. "Your father was a good man, but too soft for this land of wolves. He didn't understand the game." Vlad smiled, a cold, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I understand it perfectly." Then he stood, and the doors of the great hall slammed shut. Soldiers, loyalists he'd secretly recruited, emerged from the shadows, swords drawn. The music stopped, the laughter died. You could hear the sputtering of candles and the sudden sharp intake of 100 breaths. "You ask how many princes have ruled this land in your lifetimes?" Vlad's voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a razor. The boyars looked at each other, confused. Some started to rise. "Sit," he commanded. The word was iron. They sat. He began to point. You served my grandfather. How many reigns have you seen?" The man, pale and trembling, stammered, "5, my lord." "And you?" He pointed to another. "7, my prince." He went around the room, each answer a testament to the chaos, the endless cycle of betrayal that had kept Wallachia weak. His father had been just one more casualty of their game. "This land bleeds because of your ambition," Vlad said, his voice rising. "My family's blood is on your hands. You are the disease." He paused, letting the terror marinate. "And I am the cure." The signal was given. The slaughter was not quick. It was methodical. He made the old and the infirm watch as the younger, stronger boyars were seized. He had a job for them. They were marched 50 miles through jagged hills to the ruins of a cliffside castle. There he stripped them of their fine clothes and forced them to rebuild it, stone by bloody stone. Most died from exhaustion and exposure, their bodies mixed into the mortar of his new fortress, Poenar Castle, a tomb built by his enemies. The older boyars, the masterminds, he saved them for a special honor. Outside the city walls, his soldiers had been busy. They had sharpened hundreds of thick oak stakes. That Easter evening, as the sun bled across the sky, the people of Tirgovishte witnessed the birth of a legend. The boyars were impaled. Not a quick death, a slow, agonizing assertion of power, a warning. A young captain, his face green, approached Vlad as he stood watching his work. "My prince," the captain stammered, "the people, they are terrified." Vlad turned, his eyes reflecting the firelight from the torches. He inhaled the air, thick with the metallic tang of blood and the low moan of dying men. He finally felt it. Not joy, not rage, but a profound, chilling sense of calm. The chaos was being silenced. He had just planted his first crop. The Sultan, now Mehmed II, the boy who had stolen his brother, the conqueror of Constantinople, heard of Vlad's purge. He sent envoys to demand the jizya, the tribute tax owed by a vassal state. He demanded 10,000 boys for his Janissary corps. He demanded Vlad come to Constantinople to bow before him. The envoys, proud in their Ottoman finery, entered Vlad's court and refused to remove their turbans, citing religious custom. It was a subtle power play, an assertion of dominance. Vlad stared at them. "Your custom is very important to you," he said softly. "Allow me to strengthen it." He had his guards seize the envoys. He ordered them to nail the turbans to the men's skulls. The sound of hammers striking iron through cloth and bone echoed through the hall. He sent the screaming men back to Mehmed with a simple message: "I am no one's vassal." The declaration was made. War was coming. A war against the most powerful empire on earth. He was hopelessly outnumbered, his country bankrupt, his people terrified. He stood over the bodies of the boyars he'd executed, the first of thousands, realizing that to save his country, he would have to destroy it first. Victory didn't taste like wine. It tasted like ash. The sky itself seemed to tremble. Mehmed II, the conqueror, did not come for tribute. He came for annihilation. An army of over 150,000 men, a river of steel and faith, flowed into Wallachia. With them was Radu, now a favorite of the Sultan, promising a swift victory and his brother's head on a platter. Vlad had, at most, 30,000 peasants and mercenaries. It wasn't a war. It was an execution. But Vlad refused to play by their rules. He wouldn't give them a glorious battle to win. He would drag them into his personal hell. He unleashed a new kind of war, a ghost war. He burned his own villages, turning the lush Wallachian countryside into a blackened, barren wasteland. He poisoned the wells with animal carcasses, forcing the mighty Ottoman army to drink from mud, to march on empty stomachs. His men, dressed as Turkish soldiers, would materialize from the forests at night. They didn't attack the army, they attacked the supply lines. They slaughtered scouts. They crept into the camps of the Akinji light cavalry and slit their throats while they slept. They spread rumors. They spread disease. They spread fear. The Ottoman army, the most disciplined fighting force in the world, began to fray. The heat was relentless, the flies were a plague, and the enemy was everywhere and nowhere. Every shadow held a threat. Every villager they found was already dead from plague, or worse, a carrier. Vlad was turning his entire country into a weapon. The mantra was no longer just a thought, it was a strategy. He was imposing order on the very nature of war itself, the order of absolute terror. But it wasn't enough. The river of steel kept flowing, slower now, but still moving inexorably toward his capital. Mehmed, enraged and impatient, pushed forward, determined to crush the serpent in its nest. Vlad knew he had one final desperate card to play, a move so insane, so suicidal it was unthinkable. He gathered 7,000 of his most loyal cavalry. Tonight, he told them, his face illuminated by a single torch, "We will not be soldiers. We will be wolves. We will go into the heart of their camp and we will cut the head off the snake." The target, the Sultan's tent. The goal, assassination. It was called the night attack at Turgavista. Disguised as returning Turkish scouts, speaking the language he had learned as a boy hostage, Vlad led his men straight into the belly of the beast. The Ottoman camp was a sprawling city of tents, home to tens of thousands of sleeping soldiers. For a moment, it worked. They rode past the outer sentries, deeper and deeper into the camp. The air was thick with the smell of horse manure and simmering anxiety. Then, a nervous janissary challenged them. A word was spoken in the wrong accent, and all hell broke loose. The Wallachians drew their swords. The night exploded into a maelstrom of screaming men, panicked horses, and the wet, percussive sound of steel hitting flesh. It was pure chaos. Tents were set on fire. The Turks, disoriented, attacked each other in the darkness. Vlad and his men carved a bloody path toward what they thought was the Sultan's opulent tent. They butchered the guards, slashed through the silk walls, and found it empty. Mehmed, paranoid and cunning, had slept elsewhere. The attack had failed. The alarm was raised. Horns blared across the camp. The entire Ottoman army was waking up. Vlad's only choice was to retreat, to fight their way out of the hurricane they had summoned. They left hundreds of their own men behind, swallowed by the sea of enemies. They had kicked the hornet's nest, and now the swarm was coming. As dawn broke, a defeated Vlad regrouped with his surviving men. They had lost. They had shot their last bolt. The capital would fall. Wallachia was finished. But Mehmed's army, as they marched that final mile toward Turgavista, found something waiting for them. It wasn't an army. It wasn't a fortress. It was a forest of the dead. For miles, on either side of the road, the ground was covered with sharpened stakes, and on every stake was a body. 20,000 bodies. Turkish prisoners of war, captured scouts, and any Wallachian suspected of disloyalty. They were arranged in neat, geometric rows, a grotesque mockery of an army on parade. Men, women, and children. Vultures circled overhead, their shadows dancing on the bloated, rotting corpses. The stench of death was so powerful it made the battle-hardened janissaries gag and retch. In the center, on a taller, gilded stake, was the body of the Ottoman commander Vlad had captured weeks before, his decaying finery a final insult. This was Vlad's masterpiece of psychological warfare. This was his true victory. The Ottoman soldiers, who had faced down cannons and stormed the walls of Constantinople, stopped. They stared in silent, religious horror. Even Sultan Mehmed, the conqueror of worlds, was shaken. He reportedly gazed at the scene for a long time and said, "I cannot win this land from a man who does such things." He had not defeated their army. He had broken their spirit. The Sultan ordered the retreat. Vlad stood on the walls of his castle, watching the endless column of the world's greatest army turn around and go home. He had won. He had saved his country through an act of unimaginable horror. They called him Savior. He knew he'd become the monster. Victory was a ghost. Wallachia was saved, but it was a shattered, starving land. The fields were ash, the wells were poison, and the people looked at their prince not with love, but with a deep, primal fear. He had taught them the meaning of order, and it was a terrifying lesson. And then came the cruelest twist of all. The betrayal didn't come from his enemies, but from his allies. Matthias Corvinus, the king of Hungary, had promised Vlad aid, a Christian alliance against the Turks. Instead, seeing a weakened and controversial figure, he saw an opportunity. He forged letters pretending to show Vlad was plotting with the Sultan, declared him a traitor to Christendom, and arrested him. The man who'd stared down the Ottoman Empire was captured without a fight and thrown into a Hungarian dungeon. For 12 years, Vlad the Impaler was a prisoner once more. The cage was stone instead of silk, but it was a cage all the same. The world moved on. His brother Radu ruled Wallachia as an Ottoman puppet, living the life of luxury he'd always craved. Back in Europe, Vlad's story began to change. German pamphlets, the 15th century version of viral news, exaggerated his deeds. They weren't just propaganda, they were horror stories, complete with gruesome woodcut illustrations. They added tales of him dining amongst the impaled, of boiling his victims, of drinking their blood. They were turning a man into a myth, a Dracula, a demon. He sat in his cell a king of nothing, while his name became a curse whispered across a continent. The verified truth was horrific enough. He'd killed tens of thousands. But the fiction was eternal. He was eventually released, a political pawn in another game, and even granted a third, final reign over Wallachia. But the fire was gone. He was a middle-aged man haunted by the ghosts of his own creation. The boyars were different, the politics had shifted. He was an anachronism, a relic of a bloodier time. His end wasn't glorious. It wasn't a final stand against a mighty army. He was killed in a small, forgotten skirmish with a Turkish raiding party near Bucharest. Betrayed, some say, by his own remaining boyars. They cut off his head, preserved it in honey, and sent it to his old childhood companion, Sultan Mehmet, as a trophy. The man who'd sacrificed his soul for his country was now just a grisly ornament in the court of his greatest enemy. History remembers the empire of Mehmed the Conqueror. It remembers the castles and the art of the Renaissance. It remembers kings and popes. But the human mind? The human mind is wired for fear. It remembers the nightmare. Vlad sought perfect, brutal order in a world of chaos. But his legacy is the opposite. It is the chaos of a name that still makes us check the locks on our doors. He never drank blood. He never turned into a bat. He did something far worse. He showed the world the monster that can be born when you push a man too far. He didn't just carve out a nation.
He carved it out of flesh and bone and dared the world to take it back.